Hi, I'm Benton Stokes.
And I'm Elane O'Rourke.
And this is Cocktail Theology. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I get to sit down with you and talk about things and have a cocktail, which always makes me happy.
Yeah, exactly. This is fun times.
It is fun times. It is very, very good. And it's good. It's good to know that there are people listening to this and I hope enjoying a cocktail and enjoying themselves and thinking about things in a different way, maybe. So I love thinking about the people out there that we're talking with.
Yeah, me too.
It makes me happy.
So today we are drinking a classic Cuban cocktail called the Mojito. Now, lots of people are familiar with mojitos. They were not always as popular as they are now. Did you know that James Bond is responsible for a resurgence in mojito's popularity?
I did not.
Way back in the 2002 movie Die Another Day. Huh. James Bond and Jinx, which was Pierce Brosnan and Halle Berry, enjoying mojitos. And there was a big uptick in the interest in mojitos after that movie.
Yeah, there was a big uptick in the interest in Halle Berry after that movie too.
That's
in my household
true.
As well as everywhere else. Yeah.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Another interesting fact is that mojitos are more than 500 years old.
Really? Mm-hmm. We just made this one. I don't understand. Explain.
I know. It's so fresh to be so old. They say they originated in the 1500s, so it's one of the oldest cocktails around that we still enjoy.
I wonder if it was medicinal. I'm thinking about the mint part.
Yes, there were some medicinal roots. So the pirates used to create a drink with sugar, lime, mint, and an early form of rum. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. For medicinal purposes to treat scurvy and dysentery.
I can see the scurvy part. The dysentery, I would think, would be a hopeful thing because, anyway, yes.
Yeah, people don't usually come back from dysentery.
No.
But it's yummy.
It is quite yummy.
It's really sweet. It's if you've never made a mojito, it's basically white rum, fresh lime, fresh mint, and the fresh part's pretty important if you want a really good one.
Yeah, for the mint particularly.
Sugar, and then your favorite sparkle. So for me, I'm having Topo Chico, kind of a Mexican mineral water that I really, really love.
It's got a little sparkle, but not a lot.
Yeah,
it's
and it's super dry.
Yeah.
What did you decide to choose for yours?
I went with a Mediterranean tonic water.
Nice. So that would add some probably to the herbaceous and the citrus.
Mm-hmm. And a little bit of bitter, which I like.
Which you like.
Yeah.
It's yummy, and it's very refreshing for a springtime cocktail.
And see, I don't know, mojitos always feel like summer to me. So I kind of feel like we're peering into the possibility of summer.
We are indeed.
Which I love.
So exciting.
So what are we talking about today, my friend?
So today we are talking about, we're going to sprinkle in these episodes where we sort of demystify, define, unweaponize certain words and phrases. And today's word is redemption or redeemed. That's a word that we've used. If you've been in the church, particularly if your upbringing was like mine on more the revivalist side of things, redemption and redeemed are words that are used a lot in old hymns, old gospel songs.
I know that my Redeemer liveth.
Yes. So we kind of want to talk about what is redemption? What does that mean? The Oxford Dictionary simply defines it as the act of saving or being saved from sin, error, or evil. But it also says redemption is the action of regaining or gaining possession of something in exchange for payment or clearing a debt.
Exactly.
I know that in traditional fundamentalist Christian circles, the idea of redemption is that Jesus died so that the debt that we owed because of our sin and separation from God could be repaid.
Right, and that repayment piece is an important piece. If you're just trying to distinguish the various theories of atonement or the various theories of what happened on the cross is another way to put it, the notion of repayment is important because it's not that Jesus substituted for us and it's not that Jesus was being punished for us. Instead, it would be more Jesus repaid something. Now, in the fine bits of this that doesn't matter in a lot of ways, but I think it matters from a way you see the world kind of way. So can you talk a little bit more for me, since I didn't grow up with redemption being a primary idea, talk a little bit more about what that is?
Sure. My understanding, comes from growing up as a kid in a fundamentalist church. But redemption was essentially that I owe a debt. I owe a debt because I sin, because I am fundamentally separated from God by nature of who I am as a human being. That is traced back to what happened in Eden with Adam and Eve. There are lots of issues and problems with all of this, but that was the way that I was taught, that we are essentially bad. We are essentially human, and to be human
Is to be bad.
is to be bad. So we have a human nature, which that term is sort of interchanged with sin nature or sinful nature. And so that gulf that existed between God's holiness and my sinfulness had to be bridged. And so the way that happened was Jesus. Jesus living a sinless life and then dying to be punished for my sin, because he didn't sin, I did. So he's dying for my sin, giving his life in exchange for my eternal salvation.
Wow. Oh, the things wrong in this. And in this sense, when I say that, I'm not talking in terms of false, I'm talking in terms of convoluted. There's a lot of convoluted theology in that. Setting aside the sin, the kind of the Christian definition of redeem and redemption for a moment, just putting that aside. It really gained favor around Jonathan Edwards' time. So what's interesting is in the New Testament, I'm holding up my hands to show everybody the size of the New Testament, as if you can see it. It's very small. So in the New Testament, that concept occurs in one of the four Gospels only. That would be Luke. In Luke, it occurs in a quote from the Hebrew Scriptures.
Wow, okay.
Okay. So Luke is relaying the tie of what's all going on, because Luke is, of course, he's somebody who's gathered the accounts and tried to make sense out of everything for somebody, right?
Right.
He uses the word, or the Greek word for it, twice, and both of those are quotes from Hebrew Scripture. The other references to redeem or redemption are in Paul, right? With the exception of the letter to the Hebrews, and this is a much more interesting one, again, historically.
Yeah.
Paul uses the language of redeem and redemption frequently. Galatians, Ephesians, Titus also uses it, but Titus is a weird freaking book. Historically, it's just odd. And then it's also used in Revelation.
Ah, okay.
Okay. The reason I bring all of that up, setting aside Christian scripture, the word redeem or redemption means to regain via payment.
Yes.
Okay? So, for example, if you are old enough to remember when you could take bottles to the corner store, you can still do this in some places, including San Francisco. If you're old enough to remember when you could take bottles to the corner store and you would get paid a nickel, a dime, whatever, that was its redemption value.
Right.
Right? So essentially you would have the bottle. It was yours at that point. But if you gave it back to its owner, important language, the owner would give you money.
Yes.
That's redemption. So when you get into this whole had to die, sin, it's a tricky one. Like redemption from a Christian point of view makes sense if you think in terms of owing debts, right?
Right.
So God did whatever. I owe God. I am able to pay off my debt in one way or another, by works, by whatever. That's how I do that. Jesus came along. I don't owe God anything anymore anyway. Right? That's the way it would, that's how it would kind of have to work.
Yeah, right.
Which then kind of should take the onus off of one, if one believed that Jesus actually redeemed.
And in some revivalist churches, it kind of
Absolutely.
does.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Now,
absolutely.
the one that I grew up in, it did not.
Right.
But
Right.
yes.
What's interesting about all of that to me is I did a little research because I wanted to know where this came from. So in the Jewish rabbinical tradition, redemption is one of the three major acts of God, along with creation and, I've forgotten the correct word, but rescue, essentially.
Okay.
Redemption in that tradition, and I don't know if you remember, but when we do Maundy Thursday, we talk about the 4 cups.
Yes.
The last one is, or one, I've forgotten which one, third one maybe, is redemption, okay? And all that means in this case is more like reconciliation, right? So what God did was create, rescue, and then in the end times, which is again different for rabbinical Judaism, but in the end times, reconcile, redeems it, makes it all make sense is really kind of what it is, right? Makes it all make sense. What happens in Christianity, because for Christians, Jesus has to be sort of the end of that period before the real end times, which in some churches don't involve Jews at all.
Right.
Since Jesus has to be the end, Jesus has to be that end time reconciler. Yet here we all are. So that kind of, to me, at least what I'm grokking from this is that kind of way of thinking about what happened on the cross sort of says, well, Jesus paid the price. Uh-oh. Because we're all still here. And clearly we haven't all been reconciled. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So there's this oddness to this. Because although Paul particularly is speaking back to, he's speaking to Judaism. He's speaking to that idea that says, when all is said and done, God is going to redeem it, pull us all back together in one unified whole, right?
Yes.
The thing that was broken at the beginning is now unified and made whole. Paul's got to make sense out of the fact that clearly that hasn't happened. And I think that that's where our notion of redemption gets kind of tweaked, right? Not that it's a bad notion, but it winds up getting caught up in all these other mysteries. And so it winds up not making a whole lot of sense.
Right. And then when you add to that as a Christian, we are to, in that tradition, in that teaching, we still choose. So the onus is still upon us to choose it, first of all. So even though Jesus did this, we still have to choose to accept it, believe it, yield our lives to Jesus, to God. So it's still, even though Jesus did that, that doesn't automatically redeem us all. We still have to make a choice to receive that redemption for ourselves.
Well, and to act in a particular way. See, the problem with the language of redemption and the way you're talking about it is the goal of that language of redemption is to take away the idea that one could sacrifice at the temple or do works to earn one's redemption. However, if you still have to do all these things, you still are earning your redemption.
Yes.
So something went awry in all of this.
Yes.
And honestly, I think part of it's Paul, not Paul himself, but our way of understanding Paul, because we aren't the people he was talking to, right?
Yes.
So we go back and we read this and go, oh, well, then. And then there were some really, really early Christian fathers, I'm using that language deliberately, who were Greek or Egyptian or others, again, trying to translate this whole concept. So it just kind of kept, I think, getting more, like I think of all of the concepts that we're going to be talking about in this series, this is the one that's gotten most kind of bollocksed. So if you're again, reading through the Passover liturgy, or you're, reading through the Haggadah, boy, one mojito, man. If you're reading through the Haggadah or any other kind of way of framing redemption, what it is God's mighty hand kind of pulling us out of the mud, like saying, "Okay, you're mine. We're coming back together. I've handled everything else. Just you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's this pulling. It's like it's that the story of the prodigal son. When the father goes running out. That's redemption.
That's redemption.
That's redemption.
Yeah, to me, that is the clearest example in the New Testament of what redemption is.
Right. And remember, Ugh. The Father goes running out before the Son ever says a dang word.
Yes.
And before Jesus dies.
Exactly. So it's God reaching out to us.
And pulling us in.
Right.
And the language of my debt's been paid, which is what redemption is, it sort of makes sense. The idea that we might owe our Father, or, and I'm using that language advisedly, might owe someone for our life, for our sustenance, for all those things. It is not a theology to which I subscribe, but but it makes sense. Then if I owe something and I've been redeemed and someone has redeemed me, the fact is, even if you think that Jesus paid the debt, it's still God doing the redeeming.
Right.
Right? It's still God reaching out and saying, you know what? That nickel's sufficient. Good to go. Right? Give me back the bottle. But that's not how it feels for people.
No.
To me, when I have really loved that language of redemption, felt that sense of having been redeemed, it's when I have felt like God has come close. God has said, hey, kid, really, I got this. I know you're going to screw up. Just keep coming back. Just keep coming home.
Yeah. So for us, when we hear the language of redemption, or I have been redeemed, or the question, have you been redeemed? What do we make of that? How do we apply that to what we believe? How do we apply that to our own theology?
Well, I don't know how everyone would apply it to their theology. I mean, first of all, as we've talked about with the language of salvation, are you saved? Whatever. Do you know, do you have a personal relationship with Jesus? All those things. If somebody asks you, if somebody refers to your redemption, automatically you should just get a little, just a tiny bit itchy, because clearly they're using a phrasing that is not necessarily something that is going to be fruitful.
Right.
Okay. But when I hear the word redeemed, so for example, I know that my Redeemer lives. Okay, the magic of that phrase is that the one who, big scare quotes, the one who paid the price is alive. That's a very different view than, he's in the grave, now I'm paid for. It's much more like this ceremonial act.
Right. And
it's such a release of the guilt of somebody else having done it.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So if I am thinking of redemption about myself, I think of it much more as I'm the bottle that's gotten turned back to God. And God paid the 5 cents so I could be hanging out with God and be a vessel.
Yeah.
I am a new Coke bottle.
Brand new Coke bottle.
Or a new Topo Chico bottle.
Yes. No,
does that make sense at all?
Yeah, it does. And this is a very sticky, the concept of all of this is so sticky, and you're right. There's just so much that's convoluted about it that when you start trying to make sense of it, there are just so many contradictions, and there's so many things about it that it's like I'm not sure how that ever made sense to my brain in my younger life. I think that God does redeem us, but it's not the way we think.
Right.
It's not how we think about it. When I think about redemption, redemption stories, movies and books that are about, the wayward son coming home, or the thing that should have gone off the rails that didn't, or the life that was saved that should have been lost.
Yes.
Those are really important, wonderful stories that give us a sense of hope and a sense that maybe we're not so bad anyway.
Right.
Maybe we're okay. Maybe this is all going to be fine. Right. And, when I think in my own history, and I think about times when I feel like, I should have fallen into the fire, and God just grabbed me by the collar and pulled me right out.
Yep.
Not because I may have asked God to, but a lot of times I think the danger that we find ourselves in is even unawares to us.
Absolutely.
Like we don't know that we're about to trip into something awful.
Yep.
But God, seeing it coming, grabs us and helps us and saves us. And
Right.
I think that is very much a part of what our human redemption story collectively is.
Yes.
And there's such a beauty in that. And then, of course, there's gratitude. And, of course, there's a sense of, I owe God everything, not because God is demanding it or
Exactly.
asking for it, but because I want to give that
Yes.
because of God doing this magnanimous thing God did
Yes.
in my life.
Yes.
And I think if we can think about redemption that way,
Yes.
and think God has been so incredibly generous and kind and
Yes.
giving and loving and all these things, not because I'm a worm but because God just loves me so much that God doesn't want to see me stumble into something that I don't even see is coming. I think there is a way for us to talk about redemption and to use redemption as a part of our theology that isn't all of the sticky stuff that we've brought up today.
Yes. I wish people could see your face right now because because the smile you have is a joy. And that's what should come out of this language, right? Is this sense that it's all about how lovely and wonderful and magnanimous God is, and not about how much I owe God. It's not about that.
It's not about that.
Right? It's like, there are times I want my kid to clean her room because she thinks she owes me.
Right.
But mostly I want her to clean her room because it's good for her and it teaches her good things and she'll be happier.
Yeah.
I think it's similar for God. God wants you to be joyous and close and loved and embraced. And that's what redemption is. It's reunion.
I like that. I like
know?
that. Well, I'm glad we and the Mojitos could solve that.
You know what? I'm going to take it on first on the Spirit, because I think when the Spirit moves in our conversations, there's something useful that comes out of them. And
Absolutely.
I hope it's useful for our listeners.
Yeah, me too.
And I will take your reading of the Oxford Dictionary and whatever else as part of that. And then I will grant the Mojitos a small amount of influence. Although, literally, I've had half a Mojito. We could drink another one and then come back and revisit this.
Oh, we could.
That'd be fun for them.
That'd be fun for them. They wouldn't know the difference. So do you have a word or a phrase or something you'd like us to parse or demystify? You can share it with us. Elane, E-L-A-N-E, at schoolforseekers.com. Benton, B-E-N-T-O-N, at schoolforseekers.com. Send us ideas for episodes. We love talking about these things, and we love hearing from you.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure that we're talking about things that you guys want to hear us talking about. I'm going to finish my mojito now.
I'm sorry. I was drinking. I'm sorry, what? Oh, is that what we're doing now? Okay.
That's what we're doing.
Oh, darn. Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.